Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, where I try to make you think a little bit different about what goes on behind the technology that we all take for granted every day in our lives. For example, every day I beam your ears to a different part of the world to speak with a different guest. And if by some bizarre Twilight Zone Black Mirror kind of scenario you actually ended up lost in one of these locations for real, what would you do to find your way to the airport and get home? Now I can almost hear you all universally shouting into your phone in many languages all over the world. I'd get maps out on my phone. Now meet Mapbox. And Mapbox is a leading real-time location data mapping and design platform for developers, designers and enterprises that serves over 1.1 million registered developers and touches 350 million people monthly all over the world. And guess what? You've probably not heard of them, but you should have. Because Mapbox is the building blocks that make it easy to integrate location into any mobile or online application. And the company is changing the way people move around cities and understand our planet. But for most of you listening, if you're finding a coffee spot on Foursquare or pinning a vacation spot on Pinterest to geotagging notes in Evernote and even Facebook checking Snap or even finding a date on Tinder, they will all be using Mapbox technology. But things get even more interesting when I discovered that today's guest has quite a backstory too, and Matt Irwin works on business and strategy, humanitarian collaborations, and is actually bringing Mapbox to government too. And if all that hasn't sparked your curiosity, I don't know what will. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Washington DC, so we can speak with Matt Irwin from Mapbox. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Matt. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. Yeah, my name is Matt Irwin. I've been at Mapbox for about 4.5 years, since we were a tiny company of about 30 people in a garage in an alleyway. And I'm currently heading up a team that leads our data visualization work. So that means a combination of product focus and also working with our customers who leverage the tools for really cutting edge data visualization and analysis.
Now, Mapbox is a leading real-time location data mapping and design platform for developers, designers and enterprises. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong here, Matt, serving 1.2 million registered developers and touching 420 million people monthly around the world, which is just completely mind-blowing. And that can be from finding a coffee spot on Foursquare to pinning a vacation spot on Pinterest to geotagging notes on Evernote. Mapbox does the geo stuff so developers can focus on building their app. But even that's just scratching the surface because Facebook, Snap, Tinder are all your customers too. But for listeners tuning in and hearing about Mapbox for the very first time, can you just set the scene and offer an overview of what Mapbox is and also what problems you solve and what makes you guys unique?
Yeah, absolutely. I sort of think of Mapbox as having two jobs. The first one is to know the world in intimate detail. So it's our job to understand where things are, both in space and in time. And that means everything from, where is the boundary in a dispute between two particular countries, to where are all the building footprints in my city, to what are the traffic conditions on the street outside of my house right now, to what are the opening and closing hours of my favorite coffee shop. Our second job is to turn that knowledge into experiences for people. So I often think that if Mapbox is doing its job correctly, you have no idea how many times you've touched our platform in an average day. But you mentioned a few of our larger customers. And if you've checked the weather on your phone using the weather company or AccuWeather or Dark Sky or Weather Underground, you've touched Mapbox. If you went looking for a romantic connection on Tinder, you've touched Mapbox. If you went for a run and tracked it in Strava or one of the adventure company apps, you've touched Mapbox.
Fantastic. And I think it's also worth highlighting that you've got quite a backstory too. I mean, can you tell me more about prior to joining Mapbox? You were a diplomat, I believe, for the State Department, where you mediated boundary disputes, supported regional peace talks, and even liaised with rebel groups throughout the Middle East. I mean, can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I don't want to distract us too much, but this was my life for about a decade, living mostly in the Middle East and Africa, and it actually kind of crystallized what a map means, or what geography means, and how these lines we draw affect real people. So my specialty for the State Department was helping to mediate boundary disputes between countries that otherwise weren't talking to each other. So we would help, for example, Lebanon and Israel divide their offshore gas rights and create a maritime line of separation. We also did a lot of cross-border work to help populations at risk. So I spent a lot of time working on Syria, making sure that we could get across lines that had been drawn on maps to provide people with food and medical aid.
And it really does feel that Mapbox is much more than just a mapping platform for developers. I think it's almost like it's the building blocks that make it easy to integrate location into any mobile application. I mean, there's so many examples, and that's half the reason I asked you about your backstory there was because I think a lot of people will think, like we've already mentioned, about Foursquare, Facebook, weather or romantic apps, but it's governments, it's logistics, it's agriculture, transportation, ride and vehicle sharing, AV and AR, and of course business intelligence. So can you offer a few use cases to help listeners visualise just how much of a game changer this technology really is and how it's ubiquitous, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd love to. So let me kind of divide the world of Mapbox's users into maybe four main categories. The first one, which is in some ways the most obvious because it's where most average users will touch our platform, is those consumer mobile apps on your phone. And this really runs the gamut. You mentioned Tinder, we mentioned the weather company, but another example, one of my favorites, they have some of the most beautiful maps out there, is Lonely Planet. So we've helped them package up all of their content, which is geographically based, right? You show up in Bangkok, Thailand, and you want to know where to go for the best curry or best nightlife spots. We take all of that map data and help them put it into your phone in an offline environment so you know it's just going to work while you're there traveling abroad. And then when you're done, they present this content, whether it's your photos or the videos you've taken or social things you've shared with your friends, in kind of a trip replay that is all map-based. So you can literally trace your path through these places that you've visited in a way that's incredibly compelling. Many, many different apps we could get into that are sort of in the consumer mobile space. One of the other areas where we're finding a lot of adoption is in the sort of logistics and mobility space. This can be everything from the maps in the dashboard of a car you might be driving. So, for example, Tesla is rolling out Mapbox as their in-dash navigation apps. We also help connect customers and drivers in the on-demand space. So if you're ordering booze with Saucy or groceries with Instacart, those applications are powered by our maps, our geocoding so that they can search for your address and get an accurate delivery location, and then our navigation and traffic data, all the way to the emerging sort of micro-mobility space where, these cities are being flooded with car share or scooters or electric bicycles. And we are helping not only each of those individual companies connect with users and navigate people to where they're going, but also users make intelligent decisions about which of those micromobility options to use. I mean, if I'm in the middle of downtown San Francisco and I, want to travel 10 blocks, I really want to know whether it's going to take me longer to jump on a bike and ride there myself or jump in a Lyft and sit in traffic waiting to get there. So this is actually one of my favorite applications of Mapbox because I think that we're kind of playing information arbitrage and helping people and cities at scale make better decisions about how to move around. You mentioned government. This is also true. It's kind of where I started my work at Mapbox. One of my favorite stories here is that in the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey, the National Oceanic and Aeronautic Administration, NOAA, was putting planes in the air to capture basically real-time imagery of flooding and damage caused by the storm. And they needed a faster way to publish that imagery so that they could communicate to people that had been evacuated whether their homes were intact or damaged. We ended up processing that imagery for them. They put up a public website where people could go explore and actually look at their home. These things were getting tweeted out, shared on Facebook, and we saw sort of an onrush from all of these residents that had been evacuated saying, thank you so much to NOAA, thank you so much to Mapbox for giving me peace of mind if my stuff was safe, but also if my home had been damaged, at least I now know and can sort of emotionally prepare for my return home. And then lastly, there's an entire world of sort of enterprise applications that Mapbox touches, which may not sound as sexy, right? It's not as fun as playing with Tinder or watching a beautiful weather map move, but these really are the applications that power business decisions. So everything from Bloomberg, where the maps in Bloomberg Terminal that are used by the top financial analysts across the world allow you to access a bunch of different data feeds in real time and make decisions about whether to bet on a currency or knowing what the coltan tonnage showing up in a particular port at a particular time will be, all the way to the sort of mainstream business intelligence space where more than half of the Gartner Magic Quadrant of large BI companies are using Mapbox for their maps, just because of, again, that ability to leave your data where it is, visualize it on a map, analyze it in context, and then make a decision is something new that we have brought to the table.
And Mapbox is also the foundation for other platforms too, letting enterprises analyse their data, drone companies publish flyovers, real estate sites visualise properties, satellite companies process cloud-free imagery, and even insurance companies track assets. The scope is just phenomenal. Can you just expand on some of those as well?
Yeah, and this is actually my favorite part of being, quote unquote, a platform company, is that other organizations are building their applications and reaching their users using our tools, using our cloud-based APIs. My favorite example here is actually Digital Globe. So Digital Globe is a commercial satellite company that owns the most exquisite imaging sensors in the world. So they build $1 billion satellite that, once on orbit, can image the surface of the Earth at 30-centimeter resolution, which is exquisite. I mean, you can literally see individual humans from space. And they had a problem, which was that they've got all this exquisitely detailed imagery, and it's so data dense that it's hard to deliver it to their customers. What they used to do was give you an FTP endpoint. You could wait for hours for a single image to download, or maybe they'd ship you a hard drive if you were trying to pull down data of an entire country. And what we did was started to ingest all of their imagery, cut it into individual map tiles, and serve it out via our APIs. So you can now stream this content as quickly as possible once it's come off of the satellite, and basically have it in near real time, but also you can ingest it directly into your application. So if you're a weather app and you want to visualize the actual conditions post-wildfire on the ground, or again, if you're NOAA and you want to process post-storm imagery so you can share it with residents, we gave them the ability to massively reduce that time from satellite to putting it in front of human eyeballs.
And there's so many enterprises and apps building on top of Mapbox there. So I'm curious, really, is Mapbox actually changing the way people move around cities and helping us understand our planet? Is there any kind of scenarios that or any trends that you've noticed?
Yeah, there are two stories I'd love to share here. So the first one, we talked a little bit about the micromobility space and how, residents of cities are being inundated with all these new ways of getting around, from scooters to e-bikes. Back in July, a small e-bike company called Jump was acquired by a massive car-sharing company called Uber. And people were kind of surprised, right? Like, Uber is a car company. We thought their bet was autonomous navigation. Why are they buying a bicycle company? And it turned out that Jump and Uber and Mapbox had been working together on sort of a pilot research project in San Francisco, the results of which were that most of the trips that were being taken in Uber vehicles were less than 2.5 miles or so. And on each of these trips, Uber generally lost money. The drivers weren't being paid terribly well because it was such low mileage. And people actually could have gotten to their destination faster if they had ridden one of these electric jump bikes. So this informed Uber's decision to get into an alternative mode of transportation and really become a transportation platform company, because they realized that putting somebody in a car is not always going to be the fastest, cheapest, most efficient way to get them from point A to point B. The second example of changing the way people move around cities is working with Sidewalk Labs, which is a division of Alphabet Inc. So what Sidewalk Labs does is goes in and creates sort of a synthetic model of an entire city. And that means everything from apartment building occupancy to land use and permitting to traffic congestion on every single street at every hour of the day. And what they're trying to do is test a bunch of different scenarios. If I build additional mixed income housing over here, how does that change residency patterns? If I add a new highway overpass over here, how does that change, my peak commuting hour traffic? And what we've done is give them sort of intimate access to our map data that allows them to run a bunch of different scenarios and then create policy recommendations for cities to say, hey, you should change your traffic stoplight timing over here. Or, hey, you should consider turning this intersection into a roundabout because it'll improve traffic flow. So whether it is from influencing individual consumer decisions about what modality of transport to take or influencing policy decisions about where to build infrastructure, I do believe that we are changing the way people move through cities.
Not only that, you also work on business and strategy, humanitarian collaborations, and also bring Mapbox to government. Could you expand on that a little bit as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can imagine that in the same way that large enterprises want to be able to access location data quickly, visualize their data in location context, this is also true for the government. But some of my favorite stories out of the government space are actually on the humanitarian side. So one of the projects that I was personally involved in was in the aftermath of the Nepal earthquake. A lot of different humanitarian agencies were landing on the ground in Kathmandu and realizing that they couldn't get to the outlying parts of the city because there were literally no maps. I mean, there was no data about the roads that would lead you from where you are to the places that needed help. So Mapbox worked with the OpenStreetMap community and specifically the humanitarian OpenStreetMap team to basically organize a nonstop mapathon, working with our satellite imagery partners to provide new imagery and basically say, okay, humans, take a look at the satellite imagery, trace all the roads you can find, and then we will immediately push those into OpenStreetMap and Mapbox maps, and then deliver them to these humanitarian organizations in a low bandwidth environment so that they can start moving physical things to people that need them. So it's that ability to sort of cross the technical and the human divide in order to help people get to where they need to go and make better decisions that I love most about our work in the government and humanitarian space.
Now, another great story I read about you guys at Mapbox was it was actually born out of a development seed and the necessity to build new tools and platforms to do good in the world on projects for the World Bank, United Nations, the Red Cross, an NGO, and other non-profit humanitarian organisations. So can you tell me how that platform evolved and how it quickly became clear that there were other for-profit business applications worth pursuing as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, the distinction wasn't between non-profit and for-profit, but rather between sort of being a consulting company, which is how Mapbox got started, right? We would take on a project, for example, working with the UN to turn 30,000 pages of PDF election results from the 2009 Afghanistan elections into a map that organized that information coherently. We would execute that project from sort of conception all the way through to delivery. And what we were finding as we did it was that the tools to really work with that location data and turn it into something that was visually comprehensible didn't exist. So in order to complete these projects we were being paid for as consultants, we had to build new tools. And at some point, the tool work just got to be more compelling. Projects don't really scale. You're constantly chasing the next piece of business, and when you're done, and that project doesn't really live on. But the tool piece does, right? You build something, you put it in the hands of 1.2 million developers, and the reach that you can have with it is just mind-blowing. So Mapbox split from development seed and decided to focus on building those tools.
Now, Mapbox also powers the data visualization component of 60% of Gartner's BI Magic Quadrant vendors. So can you tell the listeners a little bit about how these companies leverage Mapbox to serve their customers? It just shows you how incredibly powerful it is.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And this one actually really surprised me. So the first major BI company that we had started working with was IBM Cognos and IBM Watson Analytics. And after watching what they were able to do with some of these tools, we very quickly got traction with the other major players in the space. So Tableau, Microsoft Power BI, MicroStrategy, Qlik, Domo. I won't go through the entire list, but it was really neat to see how in this one particular vertical, there's intense feature competition, and also they just recognize that so much of the data their users are trying to touch has a location component. And if they don't give them the tools to visualize it quickly, marry it up with their other data, and basically derive analysis and make decisions, then they're going to be left behind. And that's really what it's all about in the business intelligence space, right? These applications are designed to help users work with their data, examine it in context, and then make decisions. And so the fact that Mapbox maps are fast, we add location and context around the world, and we really let you bake our tools into your application in an intimate way, was just a super compelling value proposition for these companies.
It really is. I mean, I don't know why, when I ask them, my next question is going to be, what is next for Mapbox? I mean, where else can you go with this? You know, it's just fascinating. But I'm sure you've still got a long way to go and a lot of ambitions and a big vision for the future.
Yeah, that's right. And for me, the sort of edge of the envelope challenges that we're focused on now relate to that first job that I described at the beginning of the conversation, which is to know the world in intimate detail. And here, I really feel like we're just scratching the surface. We owe a lot of credit to companies like Google, who showed us what you could do by strapping cameras or other types of sensors onto cars and driving them around the world to sort of map things in incredible detail. But what we're trying to figure out is how you do that without the capital expense of actually putting humans in cars and driving every mile of road on a semi-regular basis. And we have some ideas. So one of the things that we just released is actually called the Vision SDK. One of the challenges in building a very, very accurate map that's suitable for navigation is knowing where all of those things are that affect the way you drive along a path, whether it's a stop sign, a no parking sign, a stoplight, markings on the road, lane markings, turn restriction markings, et cetera. And as Mapbox thought about how to get closer to that data, we realized we don't want to spend millions of dollars to drive cars around. Can we make this a distributed crowdsourced problem? So what we just did is released an SDK that allows any application that has a navigation component, whether it's Lyft with the driver nav in the dashboard or one of these micromobility applications. As you use the app and the user is looking at a map, the camera of your phone is actually activated to capture images of the world that you're driving through. And then we can actually process using neural nets on the device those particular features we care about. So stop signs, stoplights, no parking, turn restrictions, and that data flows back into our map. So much as our mobile SDK is now being used by millions and millions of people out in the world and sending data back that we use to build a living learning map, this new Vision SDK is going to do the same, but with images that we can learn from. So again, the challenge for us continues to be how do we get closer to the surface of the real world, and how do we bake that data into our map as quickly as possible?
Now, people will be listening to us today in 165 different countries, and they will be developers, business leaders, startup founders and CEOs, and I'm sure they're going to have their mind blown in exactly the same way as I have today. So if they want to find out more information, where can they find you guys online, and maybe reach out and contact a member of your team if they've got any questions after listening to our conversation today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would first head over to just mapbox.com to get a better sense for what our tools are, who we work with. You can also tweet us at Mapbox, Mapbox, and if anyone would like to reach out to me, it's my last name, Irwin, Irwin, at mapbox.com.
From this moment forward, every time I pick up my smartphone and if I call up a map on any app at all, I'll have a little sly smile and a realisation. Or if I see anybody else looking at a map, I'll be saying, do you know that's Mapbox behind that? But seriously though, just a big thank you for coming on today and sharing your story. It's incredibly valuable, the work you're doing, and I appreciate you sharing that story. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for the time.
Listening to Matt there, it made me realise just how we all take the ability to call up a map and check in on Facebook, grab an Uber or even a date on Tinder. And we take all that for granted. Because Mapbox does all that geo stuff so developers can focus on building their app. And it's so important to remember that Mapbox is the foundation for other platforms, letting enterprises analyse their data, drone companies publish flyovers, and even real estates visualise their properties. But it's not all about first world problems of getting a cab home or securing a date and checking into Facebook. Mapbox was actually born out of a development seed and the necessity to build new tools and platforms to do good in the world for projects such as the World Bank, United Nations, Red Cross, NGO and other non-profit humanitarian organisations. For me personally, great technology, great story, and I hope it makes you think the next time you use geodata on an app. But enough of me getting all giddy and geeky with excitement again. What are your thoughts and what are your takeaways from today's conversation? You know the drill by now. Your needy podcast host wants a little engagement so that he feels he's not going mad speaking into a microphone by himself in a dark room like Gary Coleman in Midnight Caller. Do you remember that show? Every episode ended the same with him saying the line,
"This is Jack Killian on KJCM 98.3 FM, and good night, America, wherever you are."
Oh man, I've digressed again, haven't I? Gone off at a tangent with my easily distracted mind. So before I get myself into any more trouble, I want to thank each and every one of you for tuning in all over the world and say until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.
This is Jack Killian on KJCM 98.3 FM, and good night, America, wherever you are.